risk, but he would have no problem fighting Joe Joyce. No problem.
How comes Wilder's name was mentioned? Because your relationship with PBC, the whole Deontay Wilder thing before, that just seems like really unrealistic.
That was the name that AJ put at the top of his list. You know, he sent me a list of fighters that he would like me to explore. Deontay Wilder was one of them. He's always wanted to fight him. I think if you said to AJ, if you can't fight Usyk, and obviously Fury's fighting, who would you most like to fight right now? I think he'd say Deontay Wilder.
What's good, family? Shout out to my doggy, Derek Bickham, for boosting up your man the YB's universal credit, no doubt. So we just heard there from your man's Team AJ, airing out and doubling down on the comments AJ made a few days ago. So for you man who don't know, AJ went on a full ego meltdown about a week ago, yeah? His CIA programming just completely bugged, and he started wigging out on the socials. And basically some trolls said to AJ, listen AJ, we've all watched your recent fights. We've all watched how your sphincter muscles have relaxed and tightened in a continuous motion. Yeah? Relaxing and tightening in a continuous motion. AKA they've been flapping. Yeah, we've all watched that. We've all watched you in there with Usyk. Your sphincter was flapping. We've watched you in there with 50-year-old Pulev. Your sphincter was flapping. We've seen you in there with Mr. Blobby. Your sphincter was flapping. And on that basis, we know, even if Usyk is busy, we know you're going to fight some next matchroom ex-Dillian White bum stiff instead. You ain't going to fight, you ain't want nothing to do with Joe Joyce or any of the top cats. AJ saw that, and because of his recent ego meltdown, he clapped back and said, listen, I've done Joe Joyce in one round back in the amateurs, and I'll do it again. Who do you think you're talking to? Yeah? So, that was what the baseline was. Now, I said, in my opinion, when AJ's handlers find these tweets and realise he's been bugging, I expected them to delete all the messages and retract some sort of apology, say, listen, we're so sorry for airing out Joe Joyce. Please forgive AJ, he's not been feeling himself and he just wants to be super peaceful, and please forgive AJ, he's flying out to the Ukraine in the next few days to try and solve, yeah, as UN peace envoy to try and solve the Russia-Ukraine debacle. That's what Team AJ were just about to do, but obviously they saw my video and realised, damn, the YB's got us. We can't delete the messages, we can't try and re-psyop the fans. So instead, that's where we are today. You're hearing Eddie Hearn doubling down. Yeah? Oh yeah, we really want Joe Joyce. Oh yeah, we really want Wilder. Now listen, people know me. Even though I've been critical of AJ's actions over the last X amount of time, because they've been dead, let's be real now. People call me a hater. No, I hate on dead things. And AJ's been dead. Oops, yeah? But again, people who know me know, I judge things on a case-by-case basis. And with that in mind, I ain't gonna lie to no one. If AJ, and if scrap Team AJ, yeah, AJ allegedly runs his own career. So let me speak to AJ directly, because I know he's locked into the channel anyway. So like I said, if AJ does indeed follow through on what he said, don't forget people, the main reason I was a key AJ supporter over the last 3 years was because he did what he said, for the most part. People thought that was being a fangirl. No. I respect people who do what they say. Now, on the other side of things, Tyson Fury would say things and then not do them. That's why me and him ain't really got along so well until recently, when he started doing what he was saying. Anyway, 2-2s. So you've heard AJ in the last week say he wants Joe Joyce, say he wants Wilder. So on that basis, if he does do that, yeah, if AJ in Usyk's absence really does hunt down Deontay Wilder and or hunt down Joe Joyce and them fights get made, or in fact scrap making the fights, we know that in the past Wilder has ducked AJ. We know working with Frank Warren sometimes can be difficult. So if AJ shows proof of trying to make them fights, and they don't happen, he'll get full respect for that. Yeah? I'm not a hater. Now, having said that, do I think... Now, you heard Eddie Hearn said, oh yeah, AJ put Wilder at number 1 and AJ put Joyce at number 2. These are the fights he definitely wants. We know AJ's exposed Eddie Hearn for telling lies that make AJ sound good in the past. Yeah? Facts. I think even in the last month, Eddie Hearn was in an interview saying, yeah, AJ told me he doesn't even need a trainer to beat Usyk. AJ comes out within 24 hours and says, I never said this to Eddie. Yeah? So the reason that's relevant is because I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, how do we know that Eddie Hearn isn't just jumping on the recent tweets that were put out? Now, to be fair to Eddie, yeah, AJ in a mist of anger and in a mist of ego denting, did say he wants Joyce and he does want Wilder. But that saying on Twitter, you want something. I mean, how many times have we seen people say they want something on Twitter and then their team don't send no emails and don't send no messages? In fact, I'd say 90% of woofing, if not more really, probably 90, not 5%, but 90% of woofing on Twitter leads to no action from the teams. So, like I said, I'll believe it when I see it. Because do I believe AJ in his current state, i.e. couldn't even get up for Usyk, or even in the Ruiz rematch, he couldn't get up for it. So do I believe he really wants Wilder, or tell I? In fact, let me flesh this out, because I actually do believe AJ does want Wilder. I actually do believe potentially he does want Joyce. That's not the question here. Because AJ wanting Wilder, the only answer, or the only question that answers, or the only answer that questions, or yeah, the only question that answers, AJ wanting Wilder, all that tells me is, or the only thing that confirms is that AJ's looking for the biggest bag. Oops. Yeah? That doesn't tell us nothing about what AJ intends to do in the fight. Oops. Do you understand? So I fully believe AJ probably does want Wilder. He probably does want the biggest fight out there, so he can go in there and lose again. Do you understand? I'm under no illusion AJ wants to make the biggest amount of money and not do a lot for it. That's never been in discussion. I've never questioned whether AJ does or doesn't want to make the most money no matter what. AJ's proven that. AJ's proven no matter what he wants to make the most money. AJ will forgo pride, ego, everything to make the most coin and take the least amount of risk. That's a fact. Bottom line. So the question that is still around is, does AJ not only want the big and difficult fights, because like I've just explained, wanting Wilder, wanting Joyce, they're relatively big fights, which isn't shocking when someone loves coin. Now bear in mind again, people, AJ had no problem losing to a middleweight in Usyk, having his belts taken, and then minutes later taking photos with the man who abused him and smiling like it's all okay. So a man with that mindset, who then later went on to say, I hope the fans enjoyed that performance, it wouldn't really be a shock for me for AJ to want to go in there with Wilder for 50 million and with no belts to lose and be happy about it. Do you understand? Same as Joyce. Yes, the Joyce fight isn't as big as the Wilder fight, but still, it's another £30 million. And if AJ had no shame losing to a middleweight, I'm sure in his mind and in everyone else's mind, I mean, look at the AJ Man fans. All the AJ Man fans have, what's the word? They've justified that, oh, YB, but Usyk was one of the best middleweights. So if AJ Man fans and AJ himself and the whole of Team AJ have said, oh, no, Usyk was one of the best middleweights and AJ's always fought the best, so it's okay that he loses every time he fights someone his own age. That's the narrative now. Eddie Hearn's been pumping the narrative that it's okay for AJ to lose as long as they're not complete bums. So, if you can accept losing to Mr. Blobby, if you can accept losing to Mr. Middleweight, you best believe losing to the biggest puncher. I guarantee you, if AJ was to get knocked out by Wilder, all we'd hear from Eddie Hearn would be is, oh well, he only lost to the biggest punch in heavyweight in the last 1,000 years. And the reason we know this is because guess what? Before AJ fought Usyk, Eddie Hearn said, Usyk is a middleweight and he's not big enough. AJ's too big. Oops. After the fight, Usyk's the best heavyweight we've ever seen in the world. Do you understand? He changes the narrative to suit him. Before the fight, Wilder ain't that heavy punching. Fury's got no chin. After the fight, Wilder's one of the most vicious punchers ever. That's what would happen. Same as Joyce. Eddie Hearn would say, well, yeah, we lost to Joyce, but listen, yeah, we lost to Joyce, but we lost to Usyk in middleweight anyway, so we've got no shame. If a man can have no shame losing his belts to a middleweight, what's the shame in losing to Joyce? There isn't none. And that's the question that's around here, people. I see AJ fans almost taking this as a W. Why are you being critical for? This is great to see AJ wants the big fights. Oh, I can't believe how AJ's prepared to sacrifice himself, and I can't believe most people would expect, or most people would take an easy fight, but AJ's he's so holy because he wants to go in a big fight. Listen, AJ wants to make the most coin. Don't forget that. Yeah, that's never been in question. What's in question is, what is AJ's intent whilst making big coin? Is he focused on going in there and making 30, 40, 50 million? Is that his number one goal? Or is he focused on, listen, I want to go in there and my number one goal is to be totally vicious and to get my get back. That get back hasn't been on AJ's mind for the best part of 5, 6, 7 years. In every performance, the only thing you can tell that's on AJ's mind is he's committed to making a lot of money and taking as little risk as possible. The Usyk performance, taking as little risk as possible. The Mr. Blobby Ruiz rematch, taking as little risk as possible. We haven't, even the Pulev fight, taken as little risk as possible. We haven't seen him go in there and put on an all-time great level performance, a get-back performance. We haven't seen that, despite ample opportunity to show that. I was the only person saying after the Ruiz loss, AJ, for his own ego and pride and sanity, must go in there with a get-back mentality. Same as Lennox Lewis. Lennox, it wasn't enough for him to go in there and for his ass to flap and just to nick a win. He wanted get back. That is vital for a fighter's mind, in my opinion. All the AJ Man fans told me, oh, YB, you're a casual. YB, you don't know what you're talking about. And then here we are. Your man's can't even get up against middleweights. Your man's taking photos of middleweights after they've pushed his wig back. Yeah? So like I said, all this talk, all this woofing is better than nothing, I ain't gonna lie. Yeah? AJ saying he wants Wilder and Joyce is better than nothing. It's better than him saying I want bums, to an extent, because even then, I mean, Eddie Hearn's been saying, well, AJ, he never fights bums. But really, when you dissect that narrative, at first glance, AJ Man fans take that and say, oh look, YB, yeah, AJ never fights bums. Unlike other fighters. Yeah, that must give him some credit, because he never fights bums. No. You man take it as a sign of, oh, AJ wants to fight the best. I take it as a sign of, he wants to maximise commercially. Oops. Yeah? They're not the same thing. Wanting to fight the best and challenge yourself is one thing. Wanting the biggest amount of coin is another thing. Team AJ, no, wait there a minute. If we're going to lose anyway, We want to lose to the biggest name. Yeah, that's why they was begging for the Fury fight. Oops. Why do you think Eddie Hearn was begging for the Fury fight before he fought Usyk? Oops. Why do you think Eddie Hearn was begging for the Wilder fight before he fought Ruiz? Oops. Yeah? Accountants Eddie wanted that cash in now. Before the big bodybuilder got exposed. That's what I'm thinking. On hindsight now. Looking back now. Why were they so desperate? Because if I was the one saying at the time. Back when Team AJ were chasing Fury and chasing Wilder, I was saying, listen, we're the money guy here. We're the commodity. I was the one saying, knuckle down and focus on your greatness. And if it so happens that them bums, Fury and Wilder at the time, want to play funny games, let them do that. As long as you're dominating and doing it viciously, it'll be their loss. Because AJ, yeah, up until he started losing, no matter what Fury and Wilder did, it didn't matter. For example, even when Fury and Wilder had fought a few times, AJ was still seen as number one. He didn't need them. All he needed to be number one was keep winning and winning in a dominant fashion. And eventually, they would have had to have acquiesced. Because that little shtick, don't forget people, yes, recently, after AJ started losing to everyone, Fury and Wilder became a lot more valuable. But at the time, before AJ lost, Fury and Wilder was looked at as a sideshow. Yeah, it wasn't the main thing in town. That's the honest truth at the time. Now it is. That last fight is the most main show in town ever going. Because of how AJ's fell off. So that tells you their mindset, in my opinion, looking back now, on hindsight. On hindsight, it showed Team AJ were desperate to get the coins in. And that's a criticism I've been making for a long time. I've been saying, why ain't AJ just focused on his own greatness? Focused on his own ferocity. I said the other day as well, people don't care really who you fight. As in, as long as you're fighting some of the best ones. What they care about is that you win and that you do it viciously. That's it. Look at Fury. Fury fights Wilder 3 times. It don't matter who you fight, as long as you win and as long as you're vicious. Look at Mike Tyson. His whole early career was based on beating medium dudes, but doing it viciously. Yeah? Instead, Team AJ focused on God knows what. And it shows. Because they ain't focused on winning, and they definitely ain't focused on doing anything viciously. AJ gone backwards. He started off winning, and he started off vicious. Now he don't win. And when he does, it's boring. That can't work at any level. So yeah, you hear these comments, like I said, they're better than nothing, but it doesn't tell us much. It doesn't answer the questions that we need answering right now. Because the only question that means anything to AJ in his career is, what is he doing this for? Yeah? Does he want the big fights to cash out? Or does he want the big fights to make a big statement? I put to you, this is about coin. AJ and Eddie have sat down and said, listen, if we're going to lose, we want to lose to the biggest name and make the most coin. And until AJ shows me differently, that's the principle I'm going on. Do you understand? And I won't believe nothing else until he shows me something else. So until he shows me he has desire and he has intentions and he has the belief and he has the refuse to lose attitude in one of these big fights, all I'm going to assume it is a cash out. Because like I said, for the last 4 fights, Ruiz, Pulev, Usyk, AJ's had no desire to really win. He's had no desire to be vicious. He's had no desire to put the hammer down. All he's had desire to do is survive and get through and cash out with a whole bunch of coin for not doing a lot. That's the trend. That's what the information and data is telling us. Anyone who tells you differently, don't have a clue what they're looking at. And they were the same man telling me, no, YB, it's good for AJ to be moist because, yeah, he's like Mandela, is what they were saying. Oops. And finally, on that note, what I'll say is that I'd rather AJ have a warm-up fight and go in there with bad mind mentality. I'd rather see that. At least that'd start a new trend, wouldn't it? Do you get what I'm saying? Life's all about, as an analyst, life's all about trends. Yeah, and AJ needs to buck this trend. If it means he has to take a relatively easy fight to get his nuts out, get his wick out again, to get his lipstick out, then so be it. At least it gives a sign of new life. Now, there's no telling. If he goes in there with a real name, he might flap again, but at least we can say, well, there's something positive in this. Don't get me wrong. Ultimately, it'd be great to see him go in there with Wilder and be totally on it, but sometimes there's nothing wrong with building confidence. Cus D'Amato and Mike Tyson would talk about this. Building confidence is vital, especially when your confidence is down. Getting a few dubs, ain't nothing wrong with that. Most great heavyweight careers are based on getting a few dubs. If AJ needs to revive his career, which then again, he ain't showed me he's serious, has he? Let's be real now. If AJ had got back with a new trainer, it'd be a lot easier to say, yeah man, let's give it a proper try. But really, he's with the bummiest trainer in the world, so I'm over it. I couldn't care less, to be honest. AJ's career for me is more about comedic value right now. I'd rather him get murked again, so I can laugh at it. Do you know what I'm saying? I'd rather see Wilder just put him out cold with a right hand. That's the best thing for AJ's career right now. He needs to be shown this game meant to be played with. Because the way he's playing it right now, I get to make 30 million for fanning around in a sparring session. AJ needs to be showed there ain't nothing to play with. And I think that's why Wilder will be good. Put him cold out. Yeah, put the big stiff bodybuilder cold out. So he can feel the pain everyone else feels. Because no one else gets to make $30 million for not doing a lot. Yeah, let AJ make $30 million and be cold spark out for 5 minutes like Pacquiao was. That will show him that this game ain't to be just, you know what I mean? Because at the moment, AJ thinks this game's all about just printing coin. Oh, well, I'll go in there, have a sparring session. I'll go in there, or better yet, I tell the fans to go on to William Hill and I'm going for the knockout. Go in there, have a sparring session, bump all the fans' coins. I think AJ had a deal with William Hill, yeah? AJ had a side deal with William Hill and said, listen, I'm going to go, I'm sure AJ told the bookies, yeah, I ain't going to do nothing in this fight. I'm going to have a sparring session. So you can bet your bottom dollar on there not being a KO. So the bookies load up the KO odds, yeah? 2-2s. Meanwhile, he tells us, oh yeah, I'm going for the KO. So honest, AJ supporters like myself thought, you know what? AJ loves to tell us he don't lie. Let's put the coin on AJ KO. Oops, get bumped. Yeah? That's your man's. He knew what he was doing. I'm sorry, 2 days before the fight, when he's sitting there saying, what do you want? KO. When do you want it now? When he was doing all that, yeah, doing way too much, doing all this extra shit, he knew in his heart of hearts what mindset he was in. And it's evident there was nothing KO about his mindset, was there? Let's be real now. Even the AJ Man fans must be able to admit there was nothing, even a smidgen of KO about his energy. He threw one uppercut, 2 uppercuts the whole night. I didn't see any hooks the whole night. And you want to talk about KO? Your zesty, fluffy belly looking ass, boogaloo.